Another King collection done. Alright guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Zach with Zacks Books, and today is going to be a little bit of a pretty much like kind of like a review, but also like a ranking. I finished the Bill Hodges Trilogy in lieu of Holly coming out in the next week or two. I am very excited for that to come out. Anytime a King book comes out, I'm always super excited for it. So in lieu of that, I had made a goal to try and read the Hodges Trilogy over the summer before it came out, and then potentially try and reread The Outsider. But I'm really short on time. Baby is looming over the horizon. Kind of ran out of time for The Outsider, but I got the Hodges Trilogy complete. Just finished it today, the day we were filming this. So, we'll link the 3 books down below. I don't think we'll link this cool looking box set thingy I got, but we'll link them down below if you want to take a look at them. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Also down there is Danielle's channel, getting close to 1,000 subs. Subscribe to her. The podcast, Bookstagram, all that fun stuff. And like I said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and let me talk about Bill Hodges. Alright, so the first thing I was just going to kind of show you is this cool box set that I got a while back, where it's got all 3 books on it, and it kind of forms like a cool little smiley face. I really like this box set. I'm just going to kind of keep it off to the side because it looks pretty cool, and I figured I'd kind of show it off. I do have hardcovers of the 3 of them individually, not in this box set, because duh. The first book is called Mr. Mercedes in this series that we have. So this book is, I'm going to rank all 3 of these at the end. In this book we're following Bill Hodges, who's a retired police officer, or not like detective or whatever he is. And what happens is this Mr. Mercedes incident happens where this lunatic drives a Mercedes into a group of people during a hiring fair, killing a bunch of people, injuring a bunch of people, and it's really bad. And he's pretty much gotten away with it at this point, but he makes a fatal mistake in messaging Bill Hodges saying, like, oh, sucks, you're never going to catch me, or whatever. And then Hodges is like, all right. You know, and Bill Hodges has been retired now for a little while. He's kind of on like the downside. He's kind of like depressed, kind of. And I want to say the guy's name is Patrick. Brady Hartsfield, not even close to Patrick. But Brady Hartsfield is this lunatic guy. I kind of already talked about this book before. I don't remember a video, but if we find it, we'll link it up here if you want to check that out. But Brady Hartsfield is this kind of, it's a messed up situation. Which I personally really liked Mr. Mercedes. I gave it 5 stars. I don't want to spoil anything, but it was a really good book. One of my favorite King books I've read this year, and I've read a really good chunk of King books this year. But pretty much, Brady pretty much messes up. He sends a letter. There's either a letter or he messaged him on something, pretty much like making Bill Hodges like mad and like want to find him now. And so he basically like, he's still retired but kind of does like detective stuff trying to find this guy while he's in retirement. When I read this book, I mentioned the show Monk to Danielle. Tony Shalhoub was in it, and it's kind of like the same thing. He's like a detective, but like he's not technically with the force, so kind of doing his own thing, but it's like okay. But some of the police people like are mad with him and they don't want him to like try and solve the case. This is where we get introduced to Holly Gibney, who is the main person in Holly, The Outsider, and the short story If It Bleeds. So we get introduced to her, which is why this series is something I wanted to read going into Holly coming out in the next couple weeks. But in short, this was a really solid story. I really enjoyed it. It got me really interested in Bill Hodges and the series itself, and I was really excited to see where it went with book 2. And like I said, I gave this one 5 stars, so I had high expectations for the rest of the series. A few people who I watch on YouTube kind of commented saying like the first one was their favorite, and then the next 2 kind of were hit or miss, and that's kind of the vibe I got. But Mr. Mercedes was book number 1, 5 stars, really solid story. And we get introduced to all these characters, which leads us to Finders Keepers, which is book 2 in the series. So there are tremendous spoilers that I really can say with the rest of this stuff, mainly because Holly is like a spin-off trilogy coming off of this trilogy. If you don't know what happens in this series to a certain person, I'm going to not spoil it here. We might do a podcast episode with this, and there'll be spoilers on there. Again, that'll be linked down below. If you have read the series, you know who I'm referring to, because they don't appear in The Outsider or If It Bleeds. And I made the fatal mistake of reading The Outsider first, so I knew what happened to a certain character. There's also a character in Mr. Mercedes who also is in all 3 of these. His name is Jerome. He's the lawn boy for Bill Hodges or something like that. He was a regular character, but he would just do a quirky thing where it just, I don't know, I didn't like it. But I did come around to liking Holly in the first book. I liked her throughout the entire series, and I'm excited to read Holly. So, Finders Keepers, the beef I have with this one is there's like 50 to 80 pages where we're getting the first part of the story, and then Bill Hodges shows up. And I get it. It's setting the mood for, like, what's the mystery we're going to be figuring out in this one? And it just was like, okay, we've got this really great story going on. This kid, I can't think of the kid's name, Pete. His name's Pete. And so basically we're following this kid named Pete. He stumbles across this chest that got buried with this old author's, like, undiscovered work in, like, this chest out in the woods near his house. And decades before, it got buried by this guy who, like, robbed the author, killed the author. We find that out in the first part of the book. And pretty much what ensues is the guy buries everything, he gets caught, he goes to prison. Decades later, this kid finds everything, and he's, like, trying to figure out what to do with it, because the author was kind of famous, but he got murdered. And there's a bunch of stuff that's in this chest that was not written, a bunch of money, and Pete's father, I think his name's Tom. I've been really bad with names with this, so bear with me. Pretty much was one of the victims at the Mercedes incident in book 1. So he's handicapped. There's this whole drama between the parents, like basically going to be getting a divorce. Like it's building up, it's ensuing, like there's all this stuff. And then Pete's like, I found this treasure chest full of money. I'm just going to leave some money at my front door and see what happens. And so he starts doing it, and it's like a bunch of money. And what ensues is pretty much the guy who was in prison gets out, and he's trying to trace back what happens with, what happened with his treasure chest. He knows about it. There's somebody else who knows about it. It's a really great story. I'm going to settle on probably, now that I've more talked about it, probably 4.5 stars. I don't really think it hit what Mr. Mercedes did, but I really did enjoy this book. It was really solid, and I liked it. Brady Hartsfield plays somewhat of a factor in this because I can't really spoil anything at the end of Mr. Mercedes, but just know that Brady's in this book, and he's way different than what he used to be. I really do think that it has a big impact in End of Watch, and personally why I deemed End of Watch the worst out of these 3. So there's your spoiler of my ranking, which I'll say more thoroughly at the end. But Finders Keepers, really great story. I like the little twist they throw in at the end with Brady and like his situation, and I thought it was pretty cool. Which gets me into End of Watch, which is book 3 of the Hodges Trilogy. Now, I just finished this today. I don't want to spoil anything with this book, obviously. I think the first 2 are more crime book, like more thorough crime books, and End of Watch is crime, but like King tries diving into like this, like, I don't know, he tried like making it seem like paranormal at the same time. Pretty much, and I can't spoil anything with this book because it's book 3. So it's hard for me to kind of talk about book 3 here because it's kind of like Twisted Dead with Darcy Coates. I talked about that one. It's kind of hard to like talk about like a trilogy of books without spoiling anything. But I'm going to try my best with this one. Pretty much we're still following Bill Hodges, Holly Gibney, Jerome, I think his name is Simpson, Jerome something. But pretty much like this is a couple of years later now. And like I said, it's hard to really, I can't like depict saying anything in this book because they're going to spoil a lot of stuff. So the next thing I might say I'm just going to wait until the podcast to fully spoil this book. Just know out of these 3, this was the weakest just because it went from like 2 true crime type novels to true crime paranormal, like King tried diving into like his old ways of like, oh yeah, this person has like a special gift and like ability and power, when it's just like, I don't know if he really needed to do that. I mean, I guess it had to work for the plot of the book, but I don't know, it just kind of threw me off a little bit. I'm settling on 4 stars with this one. It definitely seemed to be the weakest. The other quarrel I had is the way a certain character's like ending happened definitely was not how I thought it was going to go. I thoroughly also knocked off like literally a half a star because of what happened. Like in this book we find out Bill Hodges has got like this disease and like all this other crap going on with him and his body, and like it's like you could just tell in the book that something was going to happen. But like I said, I don't want to spoil too much with this book. I just thought it was going to go another way in terms of a certain character's end of the story was going to be. Which if that doesn't spoil who it was, then I don't know what to tell you. But pretty much, like I said, it's the weakest of the 3. There's nothing I really say that won't really have spoilers. Just know that Brady's back in this book, you know, and they're pretty much trying to solve this case with like these weird like Game Boy type things with this weird fish game, and I don't know. Somebody gets psychic powers, and it just really throws off the vibe of the series for me, and I just didn't like how it went. So there you have the Bill Hodges Trilogy by Stephen King, and this is pretty much the order I would go in of favorite to least favorite. Mr. Mercedes got 5 stars for me. Phenomenal book. Great way to start the series. Finders Keepers, a pretty solid follow-up. Just doesn't quite hit what Mr. Mercedes did for me. End of watch. Like I said, it was a good trilogy. Overall, I'd give the trilogy probably 4 stars. Maybe 4.5 if you do averages, whatever. I just thought that, I don't know, it just felt weird, end of watch, just compared to the other 2 books. It felt like it was too different, if that makes sense. But anyway, those were my thoughts and opinions on the Bill Hodges Trilogy. Now, next up for me is going to be Holly. Let me know your thoughts on the Bill Hodges Trilogy down in the comments, whether you liked it, you hated it, you agree with me, you disagree with me. Whatever your thoughts are, just be kind and courteous to others. But yeah, otherwise, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check out Danielle's channel. She's almost at 1,000 subscribers. Get her to 1,000. Woo! Do it for baby. But yeah, otherwise, we'll see you guys in the next video. Later.